As 2018 comes to a close, we have a wide-ranging special report for you tonight. This is about debunking something I hear more and more from people lately, this disappointed lament that in the Trump era, it really feels like nothing really matters. Tonight, I want to show you how this year actually proves things do matter. Facts matter, democracy matters, accountability matters, and I want to observe for you there are reasons we keep hearing that nothing matters. One is those people trying to get away with things, they need everyone to think nothing matters and to give up. Another reason is why it's called the Trump era. Presidents do impact the culture, and this is the first president in the modern era who's not steeped in any public service, and it shows. This is a self-promoting businessman who thinks not in terms of service or public interest, but in the deeply disturbing premise that everything is a game.
I do understand it's all basically a game. We're all here to play the game, and we're all hopefully going to play it well, but some people obviously can't play it well.
Donald Trump also says this is basically his coping mechanism, explaining over a decade ago that he handles stress with this kind of emotional nihilism, saying, I try and tell myself it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. If you tell yourself it doesn't matter, like you do shows, you do this, you do that, and then you have earthquakes in India and 400,000 people get killed, honestly, it doesn't matter. That's how I handle stress, he once told Larry King. And Trump also obviously projects this approach into a kind of political nihilism, insisting not only that nothing matters to him, that's his opinion, but he claims nothing matters to anyone. Now, on some political issues, he did prevail. Trump did not win the most votes in 2016, but the voters who did back him in the Electoral College must have felt it didn't really matter what he might be hiding in his taxes.
The only one that cares about my tax returns are the reporters, okay? They're the only ones. But no, I don't think so. I won. I mean, I became president. No, I don't think they care at all. I don't think they care at all. I think you care.
He's not going to release his tax returns. We litigated this all through the election. People didn't care.
And if people didn't care about that, Trump wants us to believe they don't care about anything. And this is a kind of a mood that makes a mockery of exposing any wrongdoing in the Trump era, a mockery that's so glaring it's become a punchline to what are honestly quite serious confessions of wrongdoing, sometimes revealed in plain sight.
I fired him because of Russia. I thought he's investigating Russia. I don't like that. I should fire him.
And you're just admitting that? Wait, so did I get him? Is this all over? No, I didn't. Nothing matters. Absolutely nothing matters anymore. Fine.
Absolutely nothing matters anymore? You've heard that. But this is bigger than even fact-checking or how many Pinocchios Trump gets in the newspapers. We all know corruption and abuse thrives in any institution where truth and accountability can be negotiated away, which is why throughout history, autocrats built their power with public displays of a triumph over anything that would hold them accountable. And not just political opponents, that's one layer, but also trying to show that the facts and the law themselves don't matter in their society. Now, I want to be clear, no one's banning books right now in America, but we do know autocrats abroad, they don't just stop with the press, they try to control and crush even peaceful responses to government, like art, books, cartoons. That's how this works. And you don't have to be a supporter of these tactics to end up echoing them or reflecting some of their goals. In fact, this is why I want to talk to you about this tonight. This whole enfeebling, dangerous idea is to wear down once engaged citizens like maybe you, and to grind up people like maybe me, what one political operative once called the reality-based community. And so what I'm about to show you right now is an echo of this problem. I'm not saying the people you're about to see want it to be this way, but watch as some people fall into Trump's trap.
The thing with Trump is it doesn't matter what he says. His people are going to love him for it anyway.
You can never prove he was wrong, but it doesn't matter, and that's why it feels so silly.
The kind of unofficial slogan of a lot of this campaign has been nothing matters, right? People say nothing matters.
It's ridiculous. 2016 is the year of nothing matters.
Look what Trump has done in this short period of time, that now we can literally sit here and say nothing matters. Nothing matters.
This is why the president acts as if he is living in a perpetual 10 minutes of time where nothing matters.
We can sit here and say and repeat that nothing matters, and many of those people, of course, have a broader record than just the soundbite, but we can also choose not to ever do or say that. We can choose to report our own original work, to focus on facts instead of spin. And let's be clear, some of this talk in our media political culture actually combines two of the most corrosive parts of our discourse. One, echoing politics as just a savage game, not a democracy with rules. And two, focusing on media predictions about the future instead of fixating on the facts about the president. And some of the same people predicting Trump will get away with things because nothing matters are, yeah, some of the same people who got their election predictions wrong.
Can Donald Trump win a general election?
My view is no, but we'll see. There's not a blue wave that's sinking them. In fact, the Republican enthusiasm is as good or higher than the Democrats.
I thought Cruz was the most talented of these Republican politicians. Tonight, there was some hope that the Democrats would have a wave election. It's not going to be a wave election.
If somehow Trump pulls a miracle comeback here, which would take a miracle at this point, then obviously it's his party. He can do what he wants with it.
So you think there won't be a blue wave?
I predict at this point in time, and I've been doing this for 50 years, I don't predict. There's no blue wave.
Now, if all of that is wrong, then what's right? Well, the evidence this year shows many things actually do matter, especially facts and carefully exposed facts about the federal government. Time and again this year, it was reporting and truths exposed about the government that led to change, including major change. That's part of why there's so much turnover in the Trump cabinet and why the courts have been so busy and why, yeah, there has been so much news. Now, some of these stories fade precisely when the facts matter and things get fixed, because then the problem fades too. So, in the spirit that things matter, here is some of the evidence from this year alone. It was investigative reporting by a host of outlets that exposed ethics allegations about several people Trump tapped to run key agencies. They were ousted over those allegations. That includes Tom Price and Scott Pruitt and Ryan Zinke. Ask those agency heads if facts matter. And in that battle between journalistic facts and John Kelly's denials, well, journalism matters. Trump aide Rob Porter ousted after those allegations of domestic abuse. Same for the battle of CBS's 60 Minutes versus Trump's nominee to be drug czar. The news magazine exposing conflicts for Tom Marino. He was out of a job 2 days later. It's not just about journalism either. It was the raw public reality of children split from their families that forced Trump to acknowledge the facts as he retracted part of that zero-tolerance border policy, because reality mattered. And when Trump wouldn't back down, others made him. Judges blocking parts of Trump's immigration policy on sanctuary cities. Information mattered more than partisanship in the red state of Alabama, where a bipartisan coalition defeated Republican Roy Moore, not because of party, but because of the information revealed about sexual misconduct allegations. Facts also mattered as Trump continued his habit of bilking charities, something veterans objected to back in 2016. It was this year that Trump lost all of the remaining charity money at the Trump Foundation. Prosecutors won a deal requiring approval for any remaining donation, and that's actually the last thing the Trump Foundation gets to do, because this month, New York prosecutors formally shutting it down. Then there's the law, which still matters in the Trump era. Bob Mueller indicting 33 people involved with election meddling, obstruction, and more. Meanwhile, inside the White House, rules do matter because they help block Trump's request to fire Mueller, his own lawyer, stopping that effort and then telling Bob Mueller about it, and then his own lawyer blocking Trump from trying to order illegal investigations of Hillary Clinton and James Comey. Trump was also blocked from an illegal request to have the FBI investigate journalists. That's an potentially impeachable abuse of power, just as a judge blocked him from a far pettier attack on reporters, that illegal effort to revoke a press pass. We've seen facts matter in how the U.S. handles bigger problems abroad, the U.S. punishing Saudi Arabia over the killing of a Washington Post reporter and dissident, and sanctioning Russia over the occupation of Crimea. And then there's how you are showing all of us that things matter, because if you voted this year, you were part of a surge that was not a 10 or 20-year high, but a 50-year high for midterm voter turnout. That's not nothing, and that was despite the message that, yes, maybe nothing matters, and many efforts to try to suppress the vote. In fact, when it comes to item on this list, to paraphrase Drake, we cannot complain, we don't even know how many things to list. we forgot, it's a lot. This list is way bigger than whoever happens to be president. It's a small and maybe an incomplete reminder of a broader truth, that in a democracy, things matter when we make them matter.
Purpose is an essential element of you. It is the reason you are on the planet at this particular time in history.
If you get involved and you get engaged and you change some minds and you vote, something powerful happens.
The first step to that power is believing you have power. The first step away from it's being told you don't have power, that nothing matters. And on that point about power, our final word tonight goes to Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." And as we reflect on quite a year, it's a fitting thought for the new year. Don't let anyone tell you nothing matters, because you will decide if it matters to you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.